Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here for this invitation and this space. I am Desiree Moya from the organization Renacer in Colombia. Patricia and Francesco have addressed the general points in regards to the thematic point in regards to sexual exploitation, abuse, or violence towards boys and adolescents. I would also like to clarify a point in regards to ages. In this case, when I talk about boys, I am talking about the age group between 9 years of age to 12 years. When I talk about adolescents, I mean 13 years of age up until 16 years of age, which are the age groups that we have worked with in Colombia, not only for research purposes, prevention, and care services, specifically for boys. As Patricia and Francesco has stated, for nobody, it's a secret that women and girls have been the main victims of sexual violence. And we have a lot of data and research that are able to support and bring evidence to all the statistics globally. But today, we would like to ensure that everyone is able to center our attention in the comprehensive way in which we address violence against boys and adolescents. First, I would like to highlight the fact that we should not lose sight that sexual violence can affect equally girls, women, and also boys and men, but also that the emotional impact that they suffer is almost the same. Keeping in mind that boys and men, it's a lot more difficult for them to be able to express and verbalize these facts. Based on some of the interventions that we've had in the field, it's difficult for them because they're very much afraid not only for being stigmatized or being pointed at. Because when we talk about sexual violence, the sexual perpetrator reinforces their malehood, and the adolescent or the boy that's a victim is feminized for allowing abuse. So it's almost the entire responsibility upon them, the fact that they were abused and the fact that they were sexually exploited. So boys and adolescents that are victims face challenges very much linked to the construction of their identity. Patricia talked about this specifically when we talk about when they're able to be recognized as victims. They were afraid to be pointed out as homosexuals, meaning that violence is completely invisible, specifically for this group. I would also like to talk about some of the main biases that block reviewing and working on violence in Latin America and Central America. We're working on Central America. Our system is highly patriarchal. At a very early age, adolescents need to start or reaffirm their masculinity, and many times by going to prostitution houses and accessing sexual services. When adolescents move away from this, the entire community starts to point at them and to look at them differently. In the context of sexual violence for girls and women, they're pointed at, and many times the word is doubted. When I talk about boys and adolescent males, society, well, we are even more hurtful. We doubt what they're saying. They always have questions like, why did you allow that? Did you like it? Why were you quiet about this for such a long time? you were able to say something? Why didn't you hit them back? You're a man. Things cannot happen to men like this. You're strong. You had ways to defend yourself. All these phrases, I have taken this directly from an intervention in a boy in a community in Colombia. The boy said that he was sexually abused by his uncle. And in that abuse situation lasted for 5 years before he decided to talk about all this. All these questions were asked by his, family, his close family. Why did I talk about this? Now it's my fault. It was very difficult to, move him away from that train of thought where he felt guilty about what happened to him. There is something else that happens when we talk about sexual exploitation, and it's that society, as we've stated previously, boys and adolescent males need to reaffirm their role as men. So they see that it's not as serious that a sexual exploiter is a woman, because then he is reaffirmed as a male and as the macho role that they need to fulfill in society. But when it happens from a man and it's a boy, since you are homosexual, you have a diverse gender identity, then prostitution is your only way out. Another example in regards to the first victim, a man that I identified in 2018 in a mixed migration flow from Venezuela to Colombia. In the Colombian Guajira area, is right at the border with Paraguachón. And they went through that area with hundreds of people that were Venezuelan migrants, among them boys and adolescents, which were unaccompanied. Back then, at the border municipality where we carried the report, to be able to report to the competent authorities a situation of sexual exploitation of a boy, the family ombudsman, right at that moment, she was very impacted, and she asked me so many times, "Are you sure what's in this report? Is it true? Is it true that this is happening here? Who is exploiting them? Is it a man? Is it a woman, or is it other men?" Like validating the fact that, oh, if it's a woman, then maybe it's, not as serious. Right at that moment, she was very afraid, and she talked about in a manner where she had no knowledge. So she at that point was requesting that we spoke to that boy and for him to tell us who was the sexual exploiter so that the person could be caught immediately. And she was also speaking from a place of fear because there was very little institutional response for that specific problem. Right now, well, it continues to be the same. Things have not really changed. It's been 5 years now, and we're still in a regularization and stabilization phase with the migratory flows. But sexual violence, sexual exploitation, and abuse, it's a lot more visible right now. Something that's really positive, quote unquote, in regards to migration is that humanitarian assistance has come into the territory, and we have been able to bring visibility to all these cases of violence, abuse, exploitation, and human trafficking of boys and adolescents. I would also like to talk about human trafficking of boys and adolescents in Colombia. We talk about people trafficking, and we feel like, oh, that's something that happens so far away from us. To Colombian people, sometimes it's difficult to understand that there is human trafficking. In our work, we're always identifying victims. There was a research done quite recently right at the borders, La Guajira and the border with Cúcuta, and also in Cartagena and the area of Sartamanta, which are cities that have a high flow of tourism. A lot of the boys that we've interviewed, they stated that they were part of, really bad name agencies. That's what they called them. But these were the traffickers. They had girls, but also boys. So when the boys were recruited, one of the main questions was, are you homosexual? Can you have a sexual activity with boys and with men and women and with trans persons? And immediately they agreed upon a price for the exchange of sex. And also, the boys stated that they created fake IDs for them, fake passports. And when they were in the city of Cucuta, they were asked to come to a park. When they went to the park, then trucks would come by to pick them up to move them to Santa Marta and to Cartagena, where they were then sexually exploited. There is a story of a boy that stated it was the worst experience in his life. He got the fake ID first. He was sexually exploited, and after that, they did not pay for what was agreed. The boy stated that after the sexual exploitation and the activity with a perpetrator, he decided to leave, and he thought that they were going to pay, but since the initial agreement is that they had to stay for 15 days in that island, they said that since he left, he could not be paid. These are realities that boys that are sexually exploited have to live through. Also in the area of Maicao, quite recently in December 2023, we identified that there are virtual platforms, because now you don't see the boys in the context of prostitution like in the street, but it's done through platforms where people are able to have access through their cell phones, and in that manner they're able to contact the boys and the adolescents for the sexual exchange. And it's something that decreases the level of visibility, and it further exacerbates the sexual exploitation situation, because how can we control that? There are other challenges, as it was previously mentioned. Access to protection services. We've talked about the need of continuing to train and create awareness and training to institutions, to the first responders, to victims, from the very first moment that a report is made. In these spaces, they re-victimize, ask additional questions, or ask questions in an inadequate manner, or when they typify the crime, it's done wrongly. They don't use sexual exploitation. They don't use human trafficking. It's just sexual abuse or carnal abuse to a person. In Colombia, we have a jurisprudence that is able to sanction sexual violence and exploitations. But this process is very slow. And for victims, it's very difficult. And access to justice, it's difficult. And when we talk about it's just natural, they say, oh, he's homosexual, then he liked it. He decided that he wanted prostitution. We can't do anything about that. It's a case that would further collapse the judicial system. All these phrases have been stated out there in the territory when we bring up cases of boys and adolescents that are victims of sexual exploitation and of human trafficking. So the main challenge is that it's become natural. It's invisible. It's very few organizations that are carrying out research. It's usually NGOs or civil society. It's not part of the Colombian state. Lack of studies. I take advantage of this space to invite universities. I'm inviting academia, Please, let's start from the different university research groups. We should start to study and bring visibility to violence, sexual violence specifically for boys. That would then allow us to obtain real data and about the situations, and we must believe them. I have another message. Sexual exploitation is not part of the life project of any boy or adolescent. Thank you.